Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 57, Duskmeadow. If you like my videos, make sure to subscribe. I have a few bonus videos I was going to release this week, but my newborn baby refused to take any naps over the weekend, so I wasn't able to carve out the time to film them, so those videos got pushed back. So I've got a bunch of videos coming out over the next couple of weeks, way more than usual, so if you want to stay up to date with all of those, then go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell. Now, on with the episode. As the game opens, the party steps out of a tree into the middle of Vasselheim. As they arrive, Matt tells them that they look around and see that the guards are out in force, and new dragon-headed ballista are being installed on the inner walls of Vasselheim, while the existing ballista are being replaced or enhanced. They ask someone at the Slayer's take about it, and he confirms, yeah, it's precautionary, just in case those dragons they've heard about in Taldore happen to make their way out here. I also want to linger on the moment where they do ask someone about it. It's really interesting. I say interesting, it's funny.
Can I just grab one of the people that are here and ask them, what's all the hustle about outside? I see them installing more.
Okay, you go ahead and, one of the guys closest to you, you've met him briefly in passing. His name is Voran. He's completely bald head with a single stripe tattoo down the center. He has a very, very pointed long chin. Human, but definitely he's probably been busted in the face a few times. You can see there's just scars and what appears to be bone structure that may have been reformed at times due to blunt trauma. But he's just sitting there sharpening his weapons, just kind of doing good upon his own self, being prepared for anything. But as you come over and ask him the question, he looks up to you and goes, "Oh yeah, well, word's gone around the town recently that there's some wandering dragon horde tearing through a Taldore, so they're just up in security around these places just in case."
Smart.
I hope so. Hope they make their way here.
Sighted the dragons though over here.
Not to my knowledge, but I'd love to get my hand on some of them scales, huh?
Oh, what's your name? What's your name?
Oran?
What? Oh, Oran? What? Loran?
Loran. Because that's what I remember.
Thought so.
It's, what?
It took over 50 episodes for that to happen.
This is so funny and I think kind of telling, because I think Matt tried to introduce this guy as someone they already knew because, like we discussed in other episodes, he was trying to handle this introduction in the abstract, to get through it as quickly as possible without making it into a whole scene. This guy doesn't matter. If Matt wanted the party to have a full conversation with someone in the guild, he could have dropped them in front of Merton or Vanessa or Aldor or even Torbir or Lyra. Instead, it's someone new. But again, I suspect to avoid the party role-playing the process of meeting this character and getting caught up on details that don't matter, Matt just ruled that they already knew him. Like, he's trying to add visual detail because that's part of his GM style and it helps make the world feel more real, but I do feel like he's still rushing through this intro because it doesn't really matter to him that much, because this isn't a character he has a lot of investment in. But then he didn't remember the name he said, and his players didn't remember it or didn't catch it when he said it, because again, he's kind of rushing through the introduction of this character, because the introduction of this character really doesn't matter. So now, once they ask about it, he has to try to remember the name he came up with. And that's just very funny to me. Vex tries to sell dragon parts to Vanessa, the leader of the Slayer's Take, but Vanessa doesn't buy in bulk, and she doesn't buy before she needs them. She only buys monster parts when the Slayer's Take has an open contract, so Vex does not get the arrangement she's hoping for. The Slayer's Take doesn't currently need any black dragon parts because there's no open contract for a black dragon. They have a contract for a white dragon, so they'll take some old scales from the last white dragon that Vox Machina killed, but when Vex tries to haggle for a better price, Vanessa says, "No, that's not how this works at all. We at the Slayer's Take get a contract from our clients. There are set prices on those contracts. If you want to sign on to that contract and provide some monster parts, then you get that price that we already agreed upon with our clients." So Vex just says, well, we'll hold on to these dragon parts for a future buyer. Again, we talked about this a bit in the last episode, so I won't rehash it, but what the Slayer's Take does just is not compatible with the party's desire for someone to buy all their monster parts, particularly because they won't take just anything, and they won't haggle with Vex. The party splits up because not everyone wants or needs to go sit outside the temple to the Raven Queen while Vax has his meeting with the Raven Queen herself. Vax, Vex, Pike, and Keyleth go to the temple, the Raven's Crest, while Percy, Scanlan, and Grog go get black powder from Victor. When they arrive at his shack, there are some workers repairing the roof, and they confirm they haven't seen Victor in a few hours, but they haven't seen him leave. Percy enters and finds Victor trapped inside a mine under his home where he's been stuck for hours. They help him out and discover his hand that was missing a few fingers is now missing all of the fingers. Percy offers to build a mechanical hand as trade, but he also wants to buy not just black powder, he also wants information about Ripley, particularly whether or not she's come back through to buy more black powder recently. And Percy's trying to ask those questions now, in advance of actually giving Victor the hand, but Victor isn't having it. Now sometimes he specifically says no, he'll give Percy those answers once the new hand is brought. Other times, it just doesn't seem like he grasps, no pun intended, what it is Percy's asking about, because his priorities are on that new hand that Percy promised.
Has Dr. Ripley, has a woman come by to buy black powder? One hand, one mechanical hand, one normal hand. Mechanical hand.
The one you're saying you can make?
I'm going to make you something, a nice, useful claw piece, yes.
So you're saying that this woman made a better hand than you can make?
No, I can make a better hand.
Then make me a better hand! Why would you give me a lesser hand?
You're going to need to give me quite a bit of black powder for that. And more questions.
Really? Had a bad day.
Is that recent? That doesn't look that recent. Oh, that's recent. That's wet. That's very wet.
It's pretty recent.
Okay. I can work with that.
In either case, both lead to the same result. Matt is telling Taliesin, you need to go complete the hand and come back later, and then you'll get your answers. It's possible Matt is just role-playing Victor. After all, Victor is very transactional in his encounters with Percy. Or it's also possible that Matt is stalling to give himself some time to prep for what Victor might actually know about Ripley. Either way, this works well for the flow of the session because it basically puts Taliesin on the hook to do more during the session. He's not just going to get all his answers from Victor in this moment and then sit patiently with nothing else to do in Vasselheim. Now he's got a project. Sometimes it can be very useful to deny your player something they're trying to do in the short term because trying to get it will actually give them something else to do during the rest of the session when ultimately they might not have anything else to do otherwise. Meanwhile, we cut to the Duskmeadow neighborhood and to the Raven's Crest. Matt describes the neighborhood as dour and gloomy, which is a bit unlike how he previously described it during the hunt for the Rakshasa. There it was a surprisingly festive place, almost like a perpetual Mardi Gras. But here he seems to be focusing more on the actual aesthetics of the environment. It seems like he's done some more world building, and he's thought about how some of these details would impact the surroundings. There are hundreds of catacombs here, and ancient rituals keep the entombed from being raised as undead. But that also means that nothing grows here, so the landscape is barren. It's a nice detail, and it definitely helps set the mood for this sequence, as Vax prepares himself for this ominous, long-anticipated communion. Vax says goodbye to Vex and leaves her outside the temple, and then he and Keyleth and Pike enter. Matt asks Pike to roll a religion check, and here he reveals that the Raven Queen used to be a mortal who ascended to godhood and replaced the previous god of death. As they approach the inner chambers of the temple, Vax's friends have to wait while he goes into the final chamber to the sacred communion pool. Vax enters a stained glass dome with a pool of blood in the center of the room. At the invitation of the priests, he wades into the pool of blood, which gets deeper and deeper, to the point where he winds up being completely submerged. When nothing happens, he willingly inhales the blood, and only then does he come face to face with the visage of the Raven Queen. By this point in the story arc, Matt has transitioned away from talking about her face as being difficult to make out in a way he described as almost like a mask, to the point where he's now literally saying that she is wearing a porcelain mask. It's a great visual detail, and as we will see as this campaign gets into higher levels, Matt has a lot of ideas for how these gods could be represented visually. But I honestly think that her image is still probably the most iconic of all the descriptions of all the gods that we will see throughout this entire campaign. Vax sees the golden threads of fate again, and he asks a very reasonable question. This was always supposed to happen, wasn't it? She basically tells him that while there is such a thing as destiny, he was still in control of what he did and what happened. In fact, he especially has the freedom to choose because he is fate-touched. And then Matt does something clever. He piggybacks off of Vax's long-standing reluctance to come to terms with his deal with the Raven Queen, and uses that as an excuse for the Raven Queen to explain her whole deal.
I know that you hate me. I know that you fear me. Most do. But only because they are without understanding. Without death, life has no meaning. Finality drives change, innovation, greatness. It is the end that I bring that drives all of you gracious creations of this land to make the world better than we did, than those before me did.
She explains that she detests necromancy and other efforts to corrupt the immortal soul, but that doesn't mean that she's opposed to any character being brought back from the dead, because sometimes it's not someone's destiny to die in that moment. AKA, No, Vax, don't worry. Now that you serve the Raven Queen, that doesn't mean that your character wouldn't allow your fellow party members to be resurrected. Basically, the Raven Queen explains that Vax's job will be to help her hunt down those who would cheat death. And then she asks if he accepts this gift from her. And that is extremely valuable for Matt to have her ask, because I don't think Vax or Liam believe they have a choice in the matter. After all, as we will see later in the campaign, Vax seems to believe that his sister will drop dead if he ever ends his deal with the Raven Queen. But Matt still gives him a chance to confirm that he really does want to do this with his character. And that's really important, especially since this arrangement is taking Vax in a completely different trajectory than what Liam might have expected or ever hoped for his character. And especially because Liam was so resistant to this direction for his character for so long. This moment matters because while Vax says he's already taken steps to become the champion of the Raven Queen, and he's even already taken a level of Paladin, it's still really valuable to demonstrate that he has the option to walk away, so that way there's no ambiguity about the fact that Vax is making this choice of his own volition. However, I think this sentiment is somewhat muddled by this moment from the beginning of their conversation.
One such as your unique essence walks these realms. Do not think I am the only one to take interest. And do not think you're the only one either. But I was there to seize the opportunity when it arose. And as such, you are now mine.
While it's really nice that Matt gives Vax the opportunity to reaffirm his commitment to the Raven Queen, that only works if the player feels like saying no is a valid option. And when you have a god literally hold you in the palm of her hand and say, "You are now mine," that does make it a bit harder to believe that Vax could walk away from her in this moment. If you're going to present a situation where your players can make a deal with a god or another powerful force, this scene is a great reference point for how you can convey the god's true intentions so the player knows what they're signing up for. And you should definitely include a moment like this, where the god basically says, "You can still walk away, we don't have to take this any further." But if you're going to do that, then I think the god should also clarify what it would mean if the character was to say no. For example, in order for Vax's decision to actually be a choice, he needs to hear her say that Vex won't just keel over when he backs out of his deal. The Raven Queen could say something like, "I will not revoke what has been done. You have given me your time and your attention and come to this audience with an open mind and an open heart, and I will not take that for granted." But without that reassurance, then there's honestly no chance that Vax won't take the deal she's presenting, because he would never walk away from the Raven Queen if it meant Vex might just keel over and die in the streets outside the temple. Finally, toward the end of this scene, the Raven Queen also claims that some of Vax's prior behavior was justified by his nature as someone who is fate-touched.
Your dual nature, rushing prematurely towards your end, wantonly throwing your life before the flames, only to pull away in those last moments. Instinct. You test your path constantly, without knowing. You've been preparing for this mantle your entire life. My beautiful champion.
Now, I'm of two minds about this moment. This is clearly referencing Vax's habit of sneaking ahead and getting into dangerous situations without his friends at his side. Something we saw when he snuck into the Briarwood's bedchambers, or when he snuck into Professor Anders' office, or when he snuck into Umbrasyl's lair. Arguably, it also includes moments like the one where he dove into a portal to the elemental plane of air and rescued Scanlan with no thought to his own safety. In a weird way, Matt is sort of justifying this behavior as part of Vax's fate-touched nature. And considering how frustrated this behavior has made some of the other players because they feel left out when the rogue goes to do rogue stuff on his own, I don't think it's bad for Matt to have a god say, "Hey, it's actually cool that Vax was doing this so often, so maybe the other players should lay off of him a bit." However, I feel like Liam already had a rationalization for this behavior, and it was rooted in his character's desires and not his character's larger destiny. I mean, sure, there's the mechanical reasons why Vax, as the rogue, is often the one to sneak ahead and get a lay of the land, or try to use his assassinate feature against unsuspecting enemies, and we've talked about that in a few episodes in the series. To Liam, it just makes sense for him to be the first into any room, it's just practical. But also, from a narrative perspective, Vax puts his life on the line because he wants to help his friends. He values his own safety less than he values his friends' safety. And partially that's because he knows he has a decent chance of disengaging and retreating if he needs to, but there's also just the fact that Vax loves his friends, and Liam loves his friends, and he loves their characters. And he doesn't mind throwing himself into potential danger if it means his friends might live a little longer, especially because the mechanics of his class and his subclass seem to reinforce this behavior. Now, having a character explanation isn't mutually exclusive from having a destiny explanation, but I don't know how I'd feel about a GM telling me that the reason I do reckless stuff is because I was destined to do so, especially if I don't think of that behavior as reckless, but instead I think it's just the most pragmatic option in each of these scenarios. And I think I'm particularly sensitive about this moment because I know that later in this campaign, a new narrative will emerge around these quote-unquote reckless moments. The semi-joking idea that Vax has a death wish. And again, I think we're seeing the early shades of that characterization of his behavior from this moment, where the god of death literally calls that behavior reckless. But I just think maybe Matt doesn't actually understand Vax's motivations behind it. I can't be sure, obviously I wasn't at the table with these players and this GM, but this is not the only time I've observed that maybe Matt wasn't on the same page as Liam about why Vax does some of the things that he does. Anyway, as the scene ends, Vax sees the Raven Queen in her human form from before her ascension, and he sees the woman behind the mask. That's a really nice moment. It's a nice way to make the Raven Queen's lore relevant to the campaign. Sure, he already gave them this information through Pike's religion check, but now it's being presented as a moment of kinship that the Raven Queen is sharing with Vax. Then he wakes up and emerges from the pool of blood. Vax meets up with Pike and Keyleth, and he says that he still has some more questions after that interaction, but he confirms that he believes it was fate, that their path led them to this moment. Keyleth is very wary about this conclusion. She asks if that's what the Raven Queen told him, and when he says, no, this is just how he feels, well, she asks how he knows. He points to the fact that Vex stole a broom and somehow that saved their lives, as well as the fact that he and Scanlan somehow survived teleporting into the stomach of a dragon. He says, if that's not fate, then what is it? And Keyleth actually doesn't have an answer, but this is a question she has also been circling. She says she has been questioning her own fate/destiny. I got a comment on my last Critical Role Demystified video where, among other objections to Keyleth's mindset that I won't get into today, they were very confused by the idea that Keyleth claimed she felt like she'd been lied to her entire life. Who exactly has been lying to Keyleth? But I think this scene speaks to where that feeling comes from for her. Keyleth questions what she has been told by her family, namely the idea that she is basically the chosen one of the Arashari. If she has been told that this is her destiny, and she also doubts whether or not she's capable of doing it because clearly she has a lot of self-confidence issues, then through extrapolation we can see that she's questioning the entire idea of destiny. This exchange also lines up with her general distrust of the gods, because she's very wary about the idea that Vax now feels like he has a destiny tied to the Raven Queen just because the Raven Queen might have said so. However, in this moment she focuses on the most important message she can deliver, which is to remind Vax that he was awesome and special before he ever made this deal. She also says this, which I think is noteworthy.
If anything, we can call her a god. We can also call her a great opportunist.
Obviously, those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive ideas, but I think she's basically arguing against the idea that the Raven Queen is omnipotent or omniscient. She even seems to be implying that any powers the Raven Queen claims to be giving to Vax aren't necessarily from her, and that he isn't doing anything he wasn't already capable of without her. I don't know if she means that literally, like if she's referring to his new paladin powers or whatever, although she could be, because technically you don't need to be aligned with a god to be a paladin. But in general, it seems like she's pushing back on this argument that Vax had a destiny that the Raven Queen had any sort of say in. I wonder if she isn't trying to make this case to make sure that Vax knows he could walk away from this destiny, specifically because she feels like she can't walk away from hers. And while their situations are definitely different, it does seem she genuinely wants the best for Vax, and doesn't want him to swear this allegiance to some entity that she doesn't think deserves it. Again, I have a video coming up really soon about the different ways players can imagine their characters' relationships with the gods of D&D, and a lot of the sentiments that Keyleth has expressed will probably show up in that video. However, in this moment, Vax confirms that he does believe in what the Raven Queen told him. He believes this was fate, and she tries to gently push back again. Like, maybe it wasn't fate, this is just what you wanted. But he literally laughs coldly at that, because this is absolutely not what he wanted, and she knows that. That being said, regardless of his initial reservations, he is fully on board now. They meet up with Vax, who is very relieved to see that he's okay, and then they all return to the Slayer's Take together. Percy sends Scanlan and Grog to buy some supplies for his project, and Scanlan also takes a detour to a hat shop. Scanlan commissions what is basically a witch's hat, and Grog buys well, sort of a combination between a conquistador's helmet and a strap-on rhino's horn. They all meet up again at the Slayer's Take, Vax takes a bath, and Percy creates the mechanical hand for Victor. The hand is very slightly opposable, but doesn't have fingers, it's more of a claw, and it can be swapped out for a mining pick. He also tells Matt that there's an inscription on the inside, but that it won't matter unless it becomes relevant, and they can discuss it offline. I don't know what it says, so my guess is that Percy engraved the hand with basically the equivalent of a medic alert bracelet for Victor. You know, something like, if found, please for the love of God, do not cremate. He goes back to Victor's shop to deliver the hand, pick up his black powder, and get some answers about Ripley's purchase history.
How much black powder did she buy, Victor?
12 hogsheads worth.
Oh, shit.
Really? And how often does she come by?
She's only come by once.
Okay.
Hey, that's really good to know. Percy takes the long way back to their quarters and stops by the temple to the Raven Queen. He pokes his head inside, and when he doesn't see any priests to the goddess, he just lets himself in. Again, he doesn't see anybody, so he asks aloud, "What do I have to pay to fix this?" At first, there's no answer, so he goes to leave, but then there's a sound, and he sees a light ahead. Matt is giving him an invitation to continue pursuing this line of questioning. But he's also presenting a very different experience for Percy than the one that Vax had. When Vax arrived at the temple, there were priests already waiting for him, they knew who he was, there was very little onboarding required. Here, Percy is not greeted by anybody, but some ominous, unseen individual is welcoming him. When Percy follows the light, he hears some footsteps and sees someone quickly go around the next corner. He's being led by someone he can't get a glimpse of. But with hindsight, it doesn't seem to be one of the priests. It seems like instead this might actually be the Raven Queen, beckoning him inside. He follows this unseen figure, who eventually leads him to a huge empty room with a stained glass dome ceiling and a pool of blood set into the floor.
Hello. Please, something terrible has happened. I don't understand how these games work. I need help to fix something. Something terrible has happened. You obviously care little for this world. I start to back out.
As you step out of the room, you hear a whisper come from beyond the chamber, from the darkness. It says, "Is it yourself you wish to fix, or something more?"
I don't think I can be fixed. There is something broken in the world.
Then come, let us talk.
I don't understand how these things work. I'm so sorry. Where do you wish me to go?
Have faith. Step in. Join me.
I strip.
Percy enters the pool and swims down, and finds the bottom of the pool. He swims up to get to the surface, but there is no surface, and he starts to panic. I like that. In this moment, we see a stark difference between how Percy's handling this and how Vax handled it. Immediately, Vax sank into the pool and surrendered to the blood. Percy swam down and found the bottom, and that kind of lines up with how he's often looking to explore situations, test limits, and seek a full understanding of any given scenario. And in this situation where he cannot get his bearings because there is no surface to the pool when he tries to swim away, he panics and drowns. And then he enters his communion with the Raven Queen. I've seen some people argue in the comments of some of my previous videos that this is an example of main character syndrome on the part of Percy/Taliesin. However, in this case, I think we can see a clear difference between that sort of behavior and what we see here. First of all, the cast is definitely excited, or at the very least interested to see what happens. Obviously, I don't know what these players were actually thinking in their hearts, but I don't get the sense that Liam was pissed that Taliesin was stepping on his moment or anything like that. It also helps that it seems like this was motivated more by Taliesin's character rather than by the player trying to take up some of the spotlight. Percy is hoping to find a solution to his problems, specifically his own inner demons. More on that in a minute. When he went into the temple, it doesn't seem like his goal was to have the exact same experience as Vax. Case in point, when there was nobody around, he took the hint and he left. That's when Matt revealed that he actually was being invited into the temple, just through a different fashion. The sequence was different, but Matt was still giving Percy a chance to explore this further. And as a result, we now get to see how Matt visualizes an interaction with a god when you aren't their chosen one. The Raven Queen's mask appears before Percy, but he does not see the threads of fate like Vax did. That's a pretty clear indication that he is getting a different experience. She isn't showing him how everything is tied together. She doesn't show him the Spider-Verse. He just gets the empty void and her looming face. However, there is something consistent here. The emphasis on Percy's freedom to choose, just like Vax had a freedom to choose.
Did it choose me because I was broken, or did it break me?
You were always broken, Percival. And you were preyed upon, just as it preys upon others, and will continue to do so until finally destroyed.
Can I be fixed?
Perhaps. Your deeds will guide your path to salvation or damnation. The choice is yours. You skirt that line still.
But the first deed is so... There's so much, and I don't think any of them see it. I I want it to die before anybody sees it. Can you help?
I've already helped, Percival. Do not think the path that you and your allies walk goes unseen. There are a great many deeds ahead of you. It's your choice to take them. Just know, should you not watch yourself, you may not find yourself on our side.
I know. There is nowhere I can look for healing other than deeds. I like to fix things.
All life is inherently broken from the start, Percival. Take solace in that. There is no perfection in life. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of death? It's to try and find ways to better yourself before the end. That gives us purpose. You are all broken. But also understand, at this point her voice gets very deep and very resonant. Mortals can achieve great things. I did.
With that, Percy emerges from the pool. He cleans himself off and wipes himself down so no one will know what he did. Then he collects a small vial of blood, casts Hex on himself, and walks back to their quarters.
So, as Percival finally wanders in, is there anything else anyone wants to achieve before the
I'd
evening's
like to
done?
go to the Raven Queen.
The next morning, they decide to transport via plants back to Whitestone to drop some stuff off, since their bag of holding is completely full. They go down to the spinning orb of death beneath the castle and meet up with Eskel Rindarian, who's comparing notes with Gilmore, who looks a lot better than a lot healthier. They get dinner with Gilmore, Cassandra, Eskel, Allura, and Kima. The arcane folks relay what they've learned so far about the spinning orb of death. It's some sort of siphon, drawing whatever goes into it to some other location. They're also working on creating a sort of magical screen to help shield the city from anybody looking for it, just in case some dragons come sniffing around. Allura also gives them the additional information she was able to find on the vestiges. She knows they're looking for Fenthras, a bow in the Feywild that's stuck in some sort of cancerous tree. And Allura tells them that the Shademirk bog seeps from the tree that holds the bow, and the bog is held at bay by the rivers of the Gilded Run. She also tells them that the Spire of Conflux was brought into the abyss by Jorhan the Sea Speaker, hero of the Verdant Expanse. Now, when this day started and they were trying to figure out where they were going to go next, Keyleth revealed that she can bring them all to the Feywild, but can't bring them directly to the tree unless she knows more about it, due to the limits of the Plane Shift spell, because she actually does know what her spells do, y'all. They wound up going to Whitestone instead, not just to drop stuff off, but also to try to get a bit more prepared about the Feywild, figure out where they're going, what dangers await them, what they need to bring, all that stuff. And then, when they first traveled through the tree to Whitestone, Keyleth tried to linger in the passageway and ask the Sun Tree if it knew anything about a cancerous tree in the Feywild. So she was trying to get more information the only way she could think to do so. But here, Matt is giving them more information, just enough to make the trip a bit easier. Now, if they transport to the Feywild, they don't have to go to a random spot. They can go directly to the Shademirk Bog, because they know where that is. Now, Matt doesn't tell them what threats they can expect, but that's okay. This still isn't nothing as far as advanced knowledge goes. Allura also has some more information about the dragons. She says white dragons tend to be more feral and less super intelligent. Green dragons are manipulative, liars. Again, this is Matt giving them a hint about some behavioral information so they can perhaps incorporate this info and come up with a plan. In this case, the info Matt is giving them is directly from the Monster Manual, because those attitudes described in the book were a direct influence in the adventure that he's designed. As a GM, you absolutely do not have to stick to any of the personalities or patterns listed in the Monster Manual, but Matt did choose to do so, because he's trying to capture the essence of D&D in this campaign, so he's using the information as presented and riffing off of that to make more complex characters who still fit D&D's archetypes. In fact, it genuinely wouldn't surprise me if he's just got the Monster Manual open and he's literally paraphrasing passages during the scene. Allura also cautions that she's heard that Raishon is a powerful spellcaster, and delivers some flavor text that evokes a few specific spells.
I found a bit about this Raishon you mentioned, and word has spoken, though little that exists out there, that she is also a very practitioned weaver of the arcane arts. So be warned.
So much so that she could almost pass as a druid wielding natural magic.
I can imagine that's quite within her grasp.
Can
I've heard rumors of her calling the sky down upon her enemies. Previous individuals that hoped to raid her space were swallowed in quaking earth as she laughed from above.
ribbity things.
I want to kill her so hard.
I know, speaking personally, when I first watched this episode, I had a theory about what calling down the sky meant. And I was wrong. More on that another time. Allura says that red dragons like Thordak are good at putting together networks of spies and followers. So the longer it takes to overthrow him, the more powerful that network will become. This is kind of an important piece of information to give to the party, because so far, they really have not been operating if there's any sort of time crunch. And that's because there really hasn't been one. Once Draconia fell, the dragons all just turtled up in whatever lands they divided up to rule. So the clock hasn't been ticking. The party feels like they can take a day or two to rest in Whitestone after the Sunken Tomb. They can take a few days in Western to get it back on its feet. And as far as they know, they're not making any sacrifice or choosing between different priorities, because there is no reason to make haste. This is something Megaphone Man has been drawing attention to in his live streams as he reacts to the campaign for the first time. He identified this issue a lot earlier than I did, because it definitely changes the tone of the campaign. Now, I would actually argue that Matt could have emphasized the fact that the people in Western were running out of gold, so presumably the people of Amon are as well, and the same would go for anywhere else the dragons are ruling over. So maybe the players should move a little faster and deal with this problem. But I don't think Matt made any effort to drive that idea home for them. So now he's choosing another aspect to highlight, a strengthening support network under Thordak. Now hopefully the party will start acting as if they have a bit of a fire under their butts. Speaking of which, Allura tells them that she's been scrying on Amon, and the land is literally becoming more volcanic just from Thordak's proximity. Once again, the clock is actually ticking. Also, at this point, the party asks about the soul anchor that Allura bound to Thordak when they trapped him in the plane of fire. Specifically, is it possible he brought the soul anchor with him when he entered our world? And now that this party has made that connection, Gilmore says, yeah, he saw something made of pulsing red glass in the center of Thordak's chest, confirming their suspicions. Now, this is something that Gilmore could have brought up at any point since the Chroma Conclave attack, but Matt waited to have Gilmore confirm this theory only once the party had already made the connection on their own, which I really appreciate. It gives the players a lot of control over making the connections and forming theories. Gilmore and Allura also link the soul anchor to Thordak's unusually large size, a nice bit of foreshadowing for future sessions that I hadn't picked up on before. Well done. Allura also implies that the Chroma Conclave alliance might have been temporary. They got what they wanted and now they're just keeping their distance from each other. But again, there's a risk here that this bit of data will make the players feel like they could slow down. So Matt ramps the tension back up as Allura speculates that Thordak won't be happy only ruling over Amon. Overall, there's a lot of excellent exposition in this scene as Matt is trying to give the party the knowledge they need to make informed decisions about this next chapter of their journey, because this really does kick off the next leg of the Chroma Conclave storyline. However, just because you've given your players all the information you want to, so they can make an informed decision, but you can still hold on to your secrets, that doesn't mean the players won't keep trying to get more information. And as I said before, once a player gets an idea in their head, good luck trying to get them to move on from that plan. So Keyleth goes to talk to the Sun Tree, and we get a pretty great exchange.
So I just reach out and touch a tree and I say, hey, old friend. How you feeling? Doing better?
Hey, bud. Much better.
You're pretty cool, Sun Tree.
Sun Tree, A-okay.
Hey, Sun Tree?
Yeah?
I was just wondering if you could tell me anything about this terrible cancerous tree in the Feywild. If you knew anything about it, he might be like your brother or
cancer?
something.
What?
No, okay. There's this tree in the Feywild, and it might have a man living in it called Fenthras, and that's the name of the bow. Bow is in it, named Fenthras, and it might be a really sick tree. Can you tell me where there's a really sick tree, maybe in the Feywild?
That sounds sad, but no, I don't know a tree like that, sorry. I've been here in Whitestone since day one.
Want to play hacky sack?
So I graduated from Berkeley, made my way to Whitestone.
My twig, smoke the dew. Barkley.
Barkley.
Cool.
Barkenstocks. I like it.
Hey, Sun Tree?
Yeah.
You apparently kind of live in the middle of all these arcane ley lines of the world.
Yeah.
How far do those stretch? Like, where
Long way, Kiki. Long way.
Can you kind of give me like a rough idea? Like, do the goats to the other side of the world? Can you kind of stretch all over the world?
Nah, just right here. Pelor put me here for a reason.
Who? Pelor?
Yeah.
Right. So you're not like a natural tree, you're a tree from the gods?
Sure.
All right. Well, anyway, you're really awesome, Sun Tree.
Speak for yourself, Kiki.
Yeah, you're so cool. I'll walk through you soon, okay? Bye. And then I leave.
Iconic. Vex quietly tells Percy that she saw the blood behind his ear. As a response, he silently brings her around to look at all the temples in town, as well as the graveyard Lady Briarwood defiled. Then they go back to the castle, and he asks Zara to toss out the Anders family bodies from the crypt and convert it to a small shrine to the Raven Queen. And he gives her the vial of blood he took from the Raven's crest, since that might be helpful.
Is this for you or for my brother?
It's for your brother, so that he can help us. We're apparently all in this together.
I give
Intriguing.
Percy a kiss on the cheek.
Oh, thank you. Tell anyone you like where I went. It's not a secret. I just wasn't ready to... I don't think your brother... I would hate for him to think I'm competing. I just had some questions.
I won't tell anyone, Percy.
Thank you.
Your business is yours. And mine, because I noticed.
Thank you for noticing, and I'm trying hard not to make it my business. It's hard to remember sometimes. That's awful, isn't it?
Percy also tinkers and makes a silver brooch modeled after a raven skull and fills it with myrrh, sandalwood, opium, and dragon's blood. The plant, not the bodily fluid. More on that in a future episode. Grog pours some oil from his alchemist jug onto the floor outside Vax's door to prank him and make him fall down. Vax sees it and writes on Grog's door in oil, "Grog smells like farts and poo." Then he puts the oil on his bare ass and presses it against the door. And then everyone goes to bed. During the night, Gilmore knocks on Vax's door and gives him a blue and black robe he made, and asks Vax to put it on and walk with him. Vax double checks there's no oil on his butt, then he puts on the robe and follows Gilmore into the hall.
You guys walk up along the hallway, leads you to a staircase that leads up further, and he goes, I know a lot has happened these recent months. I've been watching from afar, keeping tabs on your journey best that I can. But I still know so little. And you ascend the lengthy staircase and you make your way to the higher floor. You eventually open an intricate door and walk out onto a wide balcony in that tower that overlooks the grounds and the castle before you. The beautiful moonlight, the night air. You see the moon is nearly full, and the white light illuminates the densely forested countryside surrounding the castle. He kind of closes the door and walks up to you at the edge of the balcony, looking over it all, kind of elbows on the edge. Some time has passed, Vax, and much of the world moves on to newer, greater threats. But true pain never really heals. He turns to you, steps up to you, looking you close in the face. You hurt me deeply. It continued to hurt. Agony. For weeks. Months. Pain I had never experienced. It's all I can think about.
Can I make an insight check?
You would if you had time.
Oh my god!
I knew it.
No!
The pain hits you suddenly, before anything else does, as you're lost in that face and the sudden feeling and sensation of terror and horror. You suffer 18 points of piercing damage. And I need you to make a Constitution saving throw.
Oh, that's my specialty. 11.
You feel the poison.
I'll use luck.
Roll again.
18.
18. Okay. You feel what should be a pulse of poison hit your system, and you just manage to fight it off. As suddenly you look down, and there is Gilmore holding a blade thrust into your stomach. Your robes now beginning to fill with crimson red around the wound. It's in that moment you see him pull you in and stare into your face with a very, very low growl. It's all I think about. And you watch as a flicker to his form happens, and you see for a second there's a flash, not skin, but fur. You see teeth, you see whiskers, and the hand holding the dagger is facing the other direction. That's where we're gonna end tonight's session.
No! The rock! Is it Rakshasa? Oh my god!
So yeah, we'll be back next week.
That fucked with my head, Matt.
Wow.
What are you doing?
What a Rakshasa does.
Oh my god! What the fuck?
Wow.
Has he been a Rakshasa the whole time? Wait, is it the Rakshasa that's different? Is it not Gilmore? So many questions! Oh my god!
So, I'm not going to spoil what happens next, but I will say, Matt did already answer one of those questions in this very episode. Because if you'll recall, when they first saw Gilmore in this episode, he was standing next to the spinning orb of death, which neutralizes nearby magic. So it would have been impossible for the Rakshasa to replace Gilmore prior to that moment, because the illusion would not have maintained. And I think that was very deliberate on Matt's part, to make sure that we knew that the last time the party saw Gilmore before he came to Vax's room, he was still Gilmore. He has not been the Rakshasa the entire time. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what actually happened to Gilmore. This is kind of a spoiler for the next episode, but it's an important lesson for this moment, and I want to address it. Because here's the thing. If you were going to kill off a beloved NPC off-screen, you probably don't want to do it if there was no chance that the party could have prevented it. This is a role-playing game, and the players should be able to make choices to move the story forward. Yes, there can be consequences to their actions, but it fully does not feel good to just kill off a beloved NPC with no foreshadowing and no way for the players to know it was on the table. Maybe you can think of exceptions, but I think this is a really good rule of thumb. And Matt knows this. It's why he didn't kill Gilmore off-screen during the Coma Conclave attack in episode 39. Now, he did kill off Sovereign Uriel off-screen in that same sequence, but that's because he had to kill somebody, otherwise the Conclave's assault has a lot less consequences. And Uriel's narrative potential had run its course. He was no longer going to be useful to the story. Gilmore is far more beloved, and as dragons filled the sky over Amon, he was the character the party was the most concerned about. Matt left it possible for Gilmore to die in episode 41, but that decision depended on what the party did, whether they got to rescue him or got distracted by the temptation of gold. So, you know, Matt knows it would be poor form to kill off Gilmore off-screen with no warning, especially when the party had no idea he was even in danger. Additionally, Gilmore would be an especially tricky character to kill off just to heighten the tragedy for the main characters, because doing so would fall under the bury your gaze trope. This is especially true for a livestream like Critical Role, which is equal parts entertainment product as it is a D&D game. At the time, a lot of fans were very vocally worried that Matt had fallen for that trope, like so many Hollywood writers before him. And in fact, considering this episode aired just days after the Pulse nightclub shooting, and the episode had opened with a visible show of support for the LGBT community during one of the worst tragedies in recent memory, it would have been especially bad form for them to kill off one of the only canonical LGBT NPCs. Matt assured the audience online after the session that Gilmore had not been killed, to help reassure them that he knew what he was doing. And some other audience members were incensed on Matt's behalf. After all, why should Matt have to reveal one of his twists just because some audience members asked him about it? But I don't think Matt necessarily thought of that as a twist that Gilmore was alive. Yes, it was still a lingering dramatic question, but Matt is first and foremost a dungeon master. As far as he was concerned, if Gilmore was going to die, it would have to be preventable. Otherwise, it doesn't feel satisfying. In this episode, there had been absolutely no foreshadowing that his life was in peril. Therefore, from Matt's perspective, Gilmore was not about to be killed off without fanfare. Now, that doesn't mean that he's safe, because this moment absolutely does act as foreshadowing that someone should definitely go check on Gilmore and make sure he's okay. But again, Matt is playing fair with his players. He's not pulling the rug out from under them just for cruel shock value. Besides, don't you worry about Matt Mercer. He had some other dramatic moments up his sleeve for the next episode. Revealing the fate of Sean Gilmore did not deplete his war chest full of twists. But more on that when we get to the next episode. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss episode 58, A Cycle of Vengeance. This episode picks up right where we left off, and Matt throws in a few more curveballs that do an excellent job of making the opening of this next session as exciting as possible for everyone. We're gonna have a ton to discuss. But also, this episode touched on some topics that I'm going to tackle in some upcoming videos over the next couple of weeks. We've got a video about Critical Role's Pantheon, a video about building your own Pantheon, and a video about reframing your relationship with the gods as a player character. All those are going to build off of some of the concepts that we talked about in this episode, but they'll be expanded out into their own videos to give us room to discuss them properly. Also, there will be a few more bonus videos over the next few weeks. Like I said earlier, I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm really excited to talk about. So make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. I also want to thank an audience member who asked to remain nameless, but they sent me 2 books. The first is How to Draw Fantasy Art and RPG Maps. I'm getting ready to do some serious world building in a new setting, and so I do plan to make a map, and I will be leaning on this book when I do that. There will probably be a video about that at some point down the road. I got a lot going on right now, but I'm working on it. They also sent me the Fantasy Age rulebook. I am really excited about this one. I really enjoyed the Dragon Age system when my group played it, but I didn't have much knowledge of the Dragon Age setting, so that part of the game just didn't do much for me. So I'm really excited to play Fantasy Age, which is the core system behind it. I think it's going to be a ton of fun, and I'm going to make a video about that in the future. If you want to support this channel financially, the best way to do so is to join my Patreon or become a YouTube member. You can also sign up for my Ko-fi to make a one-time donation. That's okay too. I've also got an awesome Discord server and a newsletter mailing list. You can sign up for those in the doobly-doo below. Those are all in the links down there. Make sure to click here to watch my video about recruiting guest players for your D&D games. That video did not do especially well with the algorithm, so it would be a big help if you could go and show that video some love. Until next time, play fair and have fun.
Does he want
This is
wine?
what
that
happens.
Regal?
That was Regal. Don't read that. That's not. That's just.
I drew
I don't.
a dick on his picture.